on, everyone? It's just Phil with Mastercrafted, here to bring you a little bit of a palette cleanser. We've had a rowdy week of 40K with all the new rules and data slates and detachments and everything that's been coming out. So I'm here to bring it back down a level, to give you another tip and trick for playing 40K. And it's going to be something that's really straightforward. And it's going to be about the tools that I recommend every player has in their bag. So when we talk about like showing up to a table and having everything that you could need, right? And some of these tools are going to help you play faster or, play a little bit cleaner in terms of your movement or your decision making or anything like that. So each one is going to be a little different, but they're definitely going to help you. The first thing that I recommend that all players have, no matter what, if you're a competitive player or not, are some hard gauges. They sell these on Etsy all over the place. You might be able to 3D print them if you have a 3D printer, if you have a buddy that does. So I recommend having a 3-inch gauge, a 6-inch gauge, a 9-inch gauge, and even a 12-inch gauge. All of those things are very beneficial, and you could have any combination of it, right? So I have a 3, 6, 9, and 12. You definitely don't need all of those. Honestly, you probably could get away with like a 3, which is also a 2 and a 1. And then I really like 9-inch gauges, especially for deep striking, and just have that, and it's fine. I do like 6-inch gauges. I do like 12-inch gauges just because they offer a little bit more in terms of some items that need to be measured that cleanly. So a 6-inch gauge is great. A 12-inch gauge is great as well, and I definitely recommend you bringing them to the table. The next one is a little bit of a newer tool, and all it is a dice loader. So what it is it has a compartment in the top where you put your dice in as the game goes on, and it feeds in sets of 5. So instead of having to potentially count, if that's not something you're super quick at, this thing automatically re-racks the dice. It can be 3D printed. I've seen plenty of tools with that. You may be able to get it off Etsy as well. And all it does is feed the dice down in sets of 5. And then when you're counting out your dice, it is very, very straightforward. And it keeps it nice and organized in terms of your play area. Especially for newer players, counting dice, believe it or not, is something that can slow your game down immensely. So I strongly recommend for those that are potentially playing okay that way in terms of wanting to play quicker, I strongly recommend it, especially if that's not something that you would consider a strike in terms of how long it takes you to get dice ready and stuff like that. There is another way around it. You could have presets of dice. Like, I know this color dice has 25, I'm bringing 25. That way, when I go to roll 25 dice, if that's something I know some of my units are going to roll, if they're, let's say, max health or something like that, I'm ready to go. I can just pick them up. I know this is 25 dice. So one way or another, it is a tool that can help you and help you play a little faster. I always bring a clock. Even if I'm just playing a casual game or something like that, I always have it on me. Not to say that I use it all the time. Sometimes I just use it for myself, right? To make sure that, especially with new armies, I'm playing as quick as I need to be, because I want the time that I take not to be on like doing things to play the game. If I'm going to spend time doing something, I need it to be on like big decisions, not on the fundamentals of the game that aren't going to change. So sometimes when I'm playing a new army or something like that, I will bring a clock just because I know I want to do those things quicker, and I will practice it for myself. So I definitely strongly recommend bringing a clock. I think it would be really beneficial. The obvious ones are obviously make sure you have a tape measure. I'm guilty of it myself. I will occasionally show up without one. Thankfully, I have a pretty good community that will help me out. Obviously, you need to bring sets of dice, but might be a little nitpicky, and it might just be for me. So I would love to hear y'all's opinion on it, but I strongly dislike dice that are too small. So, for example, like a 6, 10, or 8 millimeter dice. Like, for example, these are our custom Denver 40K Fight Club dice. If you ever play against me, I do give these away because we got plenty of extras. This is probably the smallest I want to go, right? It is relatively big in the hand, but the symbols are super obvious and it's high contrast. So you have a white pip and then a very dark color, even though there is, it changes color. They're really neat. I got these custom made for our club. So I really like bigger dice. I don't like it when dice are too small, because I don't like it when I have to like look really hard at something, or if the colors are too close together. For example, if there was like white pips with a light background and I had a hard time seeing it, I'm not a fan of that. So do you and yourself and your opponent a favor. Just make sure you have good clear dice. It is a huge pet peeve of mine. I really don't like it, because now I'm like having to look really hard at someone's dice, especially in like tighter games. So I strongly recommend just be cognizant of what dice you're bringing. You can get dice anywhere. They have high contrast ones. I used to have all white with black pips because it was the most contrasting one. It didn't have any symbols on it, and I like them because they were very clean and very obvious. So strongly recommend you do that as a player. The other thing that I keep in my bag, just in terms of helping, is I'll bring tokens. So there's a bunch of different tokens that I use. The majority of them are challenge coins. So they're like FLG coins from different tournaments, or I have my own challenge coins for certain things. And then I bring markers as well for some of the missions, but I definitely like having those coins because I can use them for a bunch of different things. So for like my Death Watch, I use them for the once per game or the once per battle round free CP, and I throw that on units. That way I'm always tracking and my opponent knows exactly what it is I'm doing. My new Custodes, that detachment, right? Like, you have to be very cognizant of your once per games and if you've re-racked them or not with the strat. How are you going to keep track of that? Because it is unfair to ask that of your opponent. And it's also unfair when they ask you, like, hey, do they still have their once per game? And you were like, ooh, I don't know. No. That's not an appropriate answer. You need to be 100% confident in those actions, because then you are asking your opponent to, like, forgive that you forgot about it, or not have a great feeling about the fact that they don't know if you use the strat or not to bring it back, or if you use the ability to begin with. So each one of those things is definitely important. So I would strongly recommend using tokens. Don't use dice because those can very easily get mixed up. Have something that you can physically put next to the model so you and your opponent know what's going on. And that's not just Custodes. There are plenty of armies that have once per game abilities or once per battle round abilities. And if you are not comfortable keeping track of that with 100% certainty, then you need to have another way around it so you and your opponent both know what's going on. And that just makes the game that much quicker, that much cleaner, right? Because if I get asked that question, like, hey, those Death Watch, that Gravis Captain, like, has he used his ability yet for a free strat? I'd be like, nope, token's still right next to him. I haven't used it yet. I paid for a CP or whatever the case is. So each one of those is different, and each one of those can cause different effects, right, for you and your opponent. So just keep that in mind, right? I always keep extra bases as well. So I'll keep like a 32, a 40, depending on my army. That way, like, if I need to check an area to see if like the base will fit there or not, I will do so with the base versus potentially moving the model. And that brings up like my side point of, like, there are times when we need to measure to see if something will get somewhere. So like, hey, I'm going to mark this model and I'm going to measure out to see how far it's going to move with an advance, right? So I don't necessarily know if I want to move it that far yet. I've rolled the advance. I want to see how far it can get. I can eyeball it, but I want to physically get you and me on the same page so I can see it. You can use dice for that, and I think that's perfectly fine as long as you're pretty clear with where the unit's starting from. But you can also use, like, they have base edgers that you can put next to it it would be very easy to move off or move back on. You could also use the bases that I was talking about for that. So I can measure it out and place the blank base out there so I can see exactly where it's going to be without having to move the original model. Both of those are great ideas, and both of those are going to help you make better decisions, right? So I strongly recommend all of that, especially if you're a newer player that's just trying to play quicker or maybe trying to play a little bit cleaner. Each one of those are great tools to have. Yeah, absolutely. If you have any questions, or if there's something that you were like, yeah, I definitely would recommend bringing this to tournaments, whether it be a tool or an item to help you play better games at 40K, leave a comment down below. And we really appreciate it. Also, just a heads up, tomorrow at 5 o'clock p.m. Mountain Standard Time, Lane and myself will be hopping on a live stream to celebrate 100 subscribers. I cannot believe it. I'm so incredibly thankful. Thank you all for tuning in. It means so much to Lane and I that we get to share something that we're incredibly passionate about with each of you. So once again, thank you. This is just the start of something that we really enjoy and hopefully continues to do well. I will see you guys tomorrow.